Delivering revenge to my mail lady. I was reminded recently of this story that happened roughly 12 years ago. I worked IT support for the local K-12 school in town and lived not even 5 minutes away. This afforded me the opportunity to come home on my lunch break to see my kids who were not quite school age yet. I had a 30-minute break, so it wasn't much time, but was a nice way to split up my day. One day while eating lunch in the kitchen, listening to my wife's morning adventures with toddlers, I hear a horn out at the road. It was our mail lady. She was sitting in the driveway. I knew she could see me at the table. She wanted me to come out and retrieve a package from her. I know because this had happened once before when she caught me outside already. Annoyed by this summoning and pressed for time, I continued to eat lunch and told my wife to not go out there. Another honk, and I continued to ignore her. What followed was an angry lady walking the whole 40 feet to our porch and placing the package on the step. This was a part for a lawnmower. It wasn't heavy. It was one of those boxes that just happened to be too big to fit in the mailbox. She huffed and puffed the entire time. I said thank you and she returned the meanest look you could imagine. Needless to say, this set me off. So, what did I do? Well, I am a huge motorsports fan. All kinds of racing. NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula 1, etc. You name it, and I will probably watch it. Spread across all of these forms of racing are hundreds upon hundreds of individual race teams adorned with sponsors of anything you can think of. Race teams are full-blown marketing engines designed to shove ads in your faces. Race teams have these mailers known as hero cards that they send out every year to those interested. They usually consist of an 8x10, or larger, full-color photo of the race car and the driver. Sometimes they will include coupons associated with the sponsor on the car. These cards are free to request from teams online. The teams will mail them to you at no charge. And to make sure these cards are not damaged, they are specifically stamped with a "Do Not Bend" message on the envelope. I requested cards from every single team I could find. What happened was, over the course of the next 4 to 6 months, the mail lady, as required by her job, had to get out and hand deliver every single one of these hero cards to our porch as they did not fit into the mailbox. It made her life absolutely miserable, and I heard all about her thoughts on me from the neighbors. I'm glad she got the message. She ended up retiring about a year later. Good riddance. Next story. A little bit served kinda cold. So I worked at a place that used in-house mobiles, more like short-range phones that worked in the building. Anyhow, this admin officer really hated me. No idea why. I was always nice to her. One day I told her I'd misplaced my phone. She went absolutely off at me. It was super odd. Anyhow, throughout the day she told me she was going to get me in lots of trouble and hinted at me losing my job, over $40 worth of equipment. I found it later that day. I never told her I found it. Over the next month she just progressively escalated. Really rude and over the top. I knew a big departmental meeting was coming up and it had all the big cheeses there. I saw her staring daggers at me until she requested the floor. There were like 40 people there. She stood up and went on this absolutely unhinged rant about me and this phone. Calling for immediate consequences and whatever. Everyone turned to me and I just casually pulled the phone out of my pocket. Looked bewildered, shrugged my shoulders and said, I've had this phone the entire time. The big boss was like, for God's sake insert name, why would you waste all of our time with this non-important and non-existent issue? She sat back down totally deflated. I just looked around with a "is she okay, might be crazy" expression. Very satisfying. Next story. Threw my boss's papers, boxes, and supplies all over her office and there was nothing she could do about it. For context, I was working at Dollar General at the time and at this point I had lost half of the respect for my boss because of stupid crap she did before this incident. She's on vacation to help another store and her office is piling up with boxes, paperwork, and other crap. I had gotten all my duties done that night and had cleaned up her office and put away the papers and trash like a nice person. Then comes the call the next morning, cursing me out for touching things in her office when I shouldn't be in there and blaming me for crap I didn't do. So I made a logical decision. I decided to make everything exactly the way it was before, down to the last inch of where anything was before. Papers everywhere, boxes covering half the floor, pens scattered across the desk. I closed that night. Then comes another phone call from the SM, as my ASM always rats me out to the SM. She gets done cursing me out, saying I threw stuff around her office, and all I say is it's back to the way it was before I messed with your office. Then I hung up. God, that felt good then and now. Reminiscing on that makes me feel good that I lost 40 hours of PTO cause of her. Move on to the comment. Why did you lose 40 hours of PTO? I'd imagine either by being fired or quitting and losing out on any accrued PTO hours. In most states they actually have to pay your PTO balance when you leave, and not doing so is considered wage theft with hefty penalties paid to the employee. I know this because HR at a previous company got the bright idea to switch to unlimited PTO after having regular PTO. I hadn't been able to use my PTO for a year, so I talked to my wife, who was HR for a different company, and she said by CA state law they are legally required to pay out the PTO. It turned into a huge fight. My HR tried to say our PTO would roll into the unlimited system, and when we ran out of it we'd start on unlimited. Unlimited means since they aren't tracking hours they don't need to pay it out when you leave, you see. I ended up talking to an employment attorney and informed them that doing that is illegal in the state, and that such a switch, if they wanted to do it, could only be accomplished if they let us choose between using the old PTO pool and the unlimited pool when scheduling time off. Our CA employees were all planning to quit the day before the PTO cut-off date when I informed them of this. Most of us had 2 months or more banked up. Anyway, they ended up cutting everyone in CA a check for our PTO balances after the switch. Everyone still quit because the PTO problem was just one of the many ways the company was trying to screw us then. After doing that, you should have taken a bowl off the shelf and gotten a fish and put it in her ceiling panel. Gotten a fish and put it in her